Want to come out? Want to come out? Open for you. Ooh. Hi. I know. I know. I know. Yeah. Oh, Marlene. Hi. Oh, I want to see your lovely face.
Uh-oh.
Where are you?
I know I'm here.
There
There I am.
you are. How are you?
I'm good.
How's your friend Yana?
Do you remember her, Rabbi? It was nice of you to remember last night. And she's having hip replacement, and she's in terrible agony. So she's having it on Monday, and she's doing both seders. She's doing Saturday and Sunday night seders.
Is she hosting it?
Yes.
Wow. Now that is a brave lady who's overcome.
Her children and grandchildren, her child and grandchild are able to be, well, they're all able to be together. So she couldn't give this up. So it'll be 6 people, and it'll be nice.
So what are you doing tonight for your Seder?
I'm invited to my cousin's brother's house.
Oh, okay.
So I'm bringing a few things. It's just wine and candy. And tomorrow night,
your cousin's brother's house, isn't he your cousin too?
No. My cousin is Eileen. Ronnie and Eileen Abraham, you've met them. They've been to Temple.
I think so, yeah.
Eileen's my cousin. So, and then they're coming to my house tomorrow night. So I unexpectedly had this invitation. So I'll miss the Temple Seder, but I'll have my own here.
Okay, well, I think that's great. I think it's great that that you are
we'll be with family.
You'll be with family. That's so good. Yeah. So
I don't know who's going to be here today.
Well, it might be just you and me. Who knows? What I want to today is Shabbat Gadol, which is the Shabbat immediately in this case immediately preceding Passover, and here comes Randy. Hi, Randy. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.
Hi, Randy.
Oh, I think he may be muted.
There he goes. Good morning.
Good morning, Marlene, Rabbi. How are you guys this morning?
We're doing fine. We're doing fine. We're just today is Shabbat Gadol, which is the Sabbath immediately preceding Passover. In this case, it is really immediately preceding Passover. Tonight is Passover, of course, and I want to talk a little bit about Passover and about this Passover. Hi, Betty. Shabbat Shalom. And the significance of Passover this year, 2021. Well, let's just start with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Somewhere along, sometime in the course of our seders tonight, somebody, usually it's the youngest person at the table, and You know, the youngest person at the table these days might be 62. I, but it doesn't matter. The youngest person at the table is supposed to ask the 4 questions, and the first question goes, "Manishtana halayla hazeh." How is this night different from all other nights? And and the questions are, why do we eat matzah? And hi, good Shabbos, Ursula.
Shabbat
What
shalom.
we eat?
Shalom.
We eat matzah and regular bread on all other nights, but tonight we just eat matzah. We eat all sorts of condiments, including maror, but tonight we just eat maror. Why is that? Um, why do we lean? Why do we sit reclined? If you're supposed to have a cushion and sort of be like a Roman nobleman. Why do we recline on at the Seder? Why do we dip? And so that's the question. But the question is, Manishtana halayla hazeh. How is this night different from all other nights? Well, we might rephrase that question this year. We might, instead of saying Manishtana halayla hazeh, we might say Manishtana hashana hazeh. How is this year different from all other years? How has this past year been different from all other years? We hope that we're getting to the end of the pandemic. And last year, Marilyn and I did not celebrate Passover, the first Seder at least, with anyone else but us too. We were by ourselves, and then we had the community virtual Seder on the second night. Now this year we have 6 guests coming to our new home tonight, and everybody's been vaccinated, or we feel pretty safe. We're vaccinated, so it's still a modest affair. And tomorrow night we're going to have our second, and God willing, our last virtual second community Seder. And so it's still kind of different. We're coming off of a year where we're still not able to really celebrate Passover the way we're used to doing it. This year, I think this last year, we have never been so alone. I don't think any of us can remember a time when we have been so isolated from each other. And yet, we've never been less alone either. And I think that if you belong to a synagogue, a community like Temple Bethel, we have managed, at least through our technology, to stay connected. But still, there's nothing like being in each other's physical company. And not only have we been alone and yet connected within the Jewish community, the whole world, in a sense, has been alone and connected. And what is connected as? Well, we've all been suffering from the same pandemic. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and millions of people have died. Hundreds of millions of people have had this virus. Everyone has been affected. Economies have been closed all around the world, and there's been lockdown. We know. I don't even have to tell you how we've all been affected. Each one of us personally has been affected. So tonight we do something rather strange. We are inviting the stranger. At one point in the Seder, you open your door, or you say, you invite anyone who is needy to come and eat the lachma anya, the bread of affliction. What is the bread of affliction? It is matzah. And we all know the symbolism of matzah. The whole world is eating lachma anya, or at least we've been eating it. Lachma anya and the bitter herb. We've all been eating it together this year. You know, there are 10 plagues mentioned in the Passover story. The penultimate plague is the plague of Hoshech, that is the plague of darkness. And it says, and this is, we've called the corona COVID-19 a plague, and it really is a plague. There's no question. It could be counted as the 11th plague. But the ninth of the 10 plagues really symbolizes what we have been going through. That's the plague of darkness. It says, Lo ra'a ish et achiv. No person, people could not see each other. One person could not see each other, and no one could rise and go out of his dwelling. That was the plague of darkness. Isn't that incredible? They weren't allowed to, they couldn't see each other, and they couldn't leave their dwellings. Ah, could you have a more poetic description of what we have all been going through? It seems to me that when you've gone through something, it could be an illness, it could be, some painful transition in your life. You ask yourself, a thoughtful person says, okay, I've gone through this. When you're in the midst of it, all you're thinking about is getting through it, right? Yeah, I just got to get through this illness, this death in the family, or this economic downturn, whatever it is. But as you're passing through it, or as you are seeing it from the other side, when you can catch your breath for a moment, you have to say, what have I learned from this? You know, don't let any don't let any suffering, don't let any transition go by without demanding from it. Before you let it go, you say, you're going to teach me something. I want to know, why have I gone through this? What did I learn? And there is a songwriter in Israel by the name of Yishai Ribo, and he wrote a song last year about, and it was dealing with the pandemic. And he asked, I'll just say it in Hebrew in the song. He says, "Ma ata rotze navin mizeh, ma ata rotze nilmad mizeh." He says, and he's asking God, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He says, "What do you want us to understand about this? What do you want us to learn from this?" And there are so many lessons that we learn. We 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 see in this Seder, we start off with, in the Magid, that is the telling of the story. We start off with slavery. We start off with a kind of a miserable condition that we were in, but we end with rejoicing. That's how it ends. It has a good ending. But it begins with suffering. And so much learning begins with suffering. When young people who have not really, hi, Barbara, good Shabbos, Chag Sameach. Yeah. Hi, Stanley, so good to see you. How you doing? Good. When young people who really haven't experienced a lot of life make very strong pronouncements about this or that. Some of us older people, for wise, we don't say, we don't correct them, we listen to them and we go, okay, but when somebody I always learn, or the best lessons I've learned have been through my own suffering, or suffering that other people, or from people who have actually experienced some suffering, and they've got through it. And I went, oh, whoa, you understand. I get, you have something to teach me. Um, um, my mom, I mentioned this last week, but I'm going to mention it again. um, Maimonides, Maimonides talks about, he talks about the cities of refuge and the law of manslaughter. You know, a manslaughterer in the Bible was as subject to the death penalty as as a murderer, and which seems a little unfair. You know, there is a difference between manslaughter and murder, and that was rectified later on in Jewish law. But the law was this, as it's described in the Torah: if someone accidentally kills another person, um, and he or she runs to one of the 48 Levitical cities. There were 48 cities of refuge in ancient Israel
That's a lot.
yeah, there were. And if you went to them, so there was one very close, no matter where you were. If you ran to it, nobody could harm you. Nobody could take vengeance on you, and you were safe there. Now, you couldn't step foot outside the city of refuge until, without risking your life, until the high priest died. When the high priest died, there was general mourning all over ancient Israel. And what happened was, at that time, you were not allowed, no one could hurt the manslaughterer, right? Hands off. And Maimonides talks about this, and he says, you know, when the whole country, when the high priest died, there was general mourning all over Israel. Everybody mourned. Everybody felt sad when the high priest died. And when you have a community, or in this case, the world community, in the case of this pandemic, when everybody's suffering, you put aside ideas of vengeance. You put aside pettiness, resentment. You forgive each other. You know, at a funeral, you'll see this often at a funeral. There have been family feuds going on, and somebody everybody loved died and cared about. All of a sudden, people get together and they remember the loved one. And at least for there's an opening, right? Have you seen that? There's an opening to get back together. So here we are. We've all suffered with this. We've all suffered. The whole world has suffered because of this pandemic. So what do? You know, we say, um, we say, let all who are in need come and share this lachma anya, this bread of affliction. Now that's a strange, that is a strange invitation. I'm not setting, you know, actually we're hosting tonight where we actually made a pretty good meal. I made a great turkey, but anyway, and I make a haroset that you could die for. I use apricots, walnuts and honey. It's great. But anyway, but the main thing is, I say, come. The invitation is come and share the bread of affliction. If I'm going to invite you to my house, why, you know, why am I going to say, come and share this misery with me? This dry cracker. Why am I going to do that? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
That is very interesting, but it relates to something you just said. We came in a few minutes late. How you know the people that have gone through Soros, and you realize you can learn from them and all. And when you say the bread of affliction, that means we know you well enough that you can be with us at our worst, when we have nothing but that plain dry little cracker matzah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. you know, and you know, they say misery loves company. It's true.
Yes.
You know, I don't- when I'm going through something, and I know one of you is going through the same thing, or you have gone through something similar. You know what? You bring great comfort to me. I know I'm not alone, right? I know I'm not alone. I go, "Ugh, oh, you mean I'm, oh, okay. You know, isn't that true? You know,
Yes.
misery loves company is kind of has a negative kind of connotation. I think it is a real positive thing. Let's share, let's share in our suffering. And by doing that, you know, it's interesting uh, how the symbolism of the matzah changes over the course of the Seder. It becomes the bread of affliction becomes the bread of liberation, of Chirut, right? It's sort of interesting. We share, we share, you know, our lives, our difficulties. And now, you know who Primo Levi was? He was a wonderful Italian Jewish writer. What was the name of his book? Oh, gee, I can't remember. Uh, he he was at Auschwitz. He survived Auschwitz, and he said the 10 worst days at Auschwitz weren't when the Nazis and when the Germans were there. The worst 10 days were when the Nazis left. What happened was the Nazis knew the Germans were coming. I'm sorry, the Russians were coming. They took up everyone who could walk into these horrible forced marches. They left the people who couldn't walk, who were too weak, and and they just left them. It was January in Poland. It was ice cold. There was no food. It or you know, people just had some scraps of bread, and it was miserable. So Primo Levi said they started a fire just to warm up the barracks, right? And as the heat began to permeate, the warmth began to permeate the room, they realized the Germans had gone. And he said something changed. There was now I just have to preface this. The law, the unwritten law in the concentration camps was this: eat your own bread, eat your own bread. And if you can eat the bread of someone else, eat that too. You got to survive. You got to keep that in mind. And he said he and a few of the people who were ambulatory enough to start this fire just to warm the place up, he said a guy turned to them with a little bit of bread and he said, hey, shared his bread, shared his bread with and they all began, whatever little crust of bread they they had, they shared it. He said the law of the camp, you know, the law of the jungle had 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 been broken, and they became human again by sharing. They sharing their, and it was their lachma anya. It was their bread of affliction. They shared it, and he said it became, you know, they then knew that they were truly liberated, and the Russians came, and eventually, uh, you know, they were truly freed, and they got fed, and they made it. Um, what is it? What do we read in our Haggadahs? We say, well, what does it say in the Torah? It says, on that day, the day of your liberation, on that day, you shall tell your child because of what God did for you when we were in Egypt. Each one of us is supposed to, we are supposed to feel as if we were liberated from Egypt. You know, everyone. Um, and there's a discussion. Um, Maimonides knew of a convert to Judaism by the name of Avadia. And he said, well, my ancestors weren't there. Can I say this? And Maimonides says, yes, you too. You, the convert, you were part of us. Had you been there, God would have liberated you too. We all do, whether you're a native-born person or you're someone who's come to us. Every Jew must somehow feel that he or she came out of Egypt. And all of us have been in our own Egypt. Every one of you has suffered something. Egypt, the word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, which literally means a narrow place. The word tsuris in Yiddish comes from the word tsar, which means narrowness. And Egypt, the word Egypt just means narrow place. And so when we sit down to our Seders tonight, and we remember how collectively we came out of Egypt 3,200 years ago, each one of us can think of something that we've gone through and we were liberated from. Every one of us has had some sort of redemption, and we can identify with this story. Yes, you came out of Egypt. You felt it. And Rashi says something interesting. He says, why, or he raises the question, why did God take me? Why did God allow me? Why did God allow us to be enslaved in the first place and then bring us out of Egypt? Why? It's a good question. And again, my wife, right behind me, got her Seder table. I'm out in my lanai now. My Marilyn has got salt and pepper shakers she only puts out on Passover. Now you got them too. That's exactly what we have. Look at that. See what we have, the same thing, Marlene. They're question marks, right? See the question mark?
In Hebrew, it says Manishtana Halayla Hazeh on the bottom.
They're question marks, right? You're supposed to, a good Jewish parent, when their child comes home from school, doesn't say, sweetheart, what did you learn in school today? You know what a good Jewish parent says? A thoughtful Jewish. Did you ask a good question today? That's what, did you ask a good question? Did you come up with a good, that's what Jews are. We want to ask a question. So the question is that Rashi raises is, why did God allow us to become slaves and then rescue us and then redeem us? Well, he says, and it's sort of ironic or paradoxical. He says, so I could fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah and maror. For that, my ancestors were slaves. For 230 years, we were in Egypt for 400, but 230 of those years. For that, so I could eat this dry cracker and this bitter, this horseradish. God allowed us to be slaves so that we would identify, we would understand what it is like to be a slave, and that we would never be slaves again. And we want to remind ourselves what it feels like to be a slave, and we have done this for thousands of years. And so we Jews would become the most consistent fighters for freedom. You think about it. Jews have been on the front line of every, most fights for human dignity and liberation. We've been there. And, in America, especially here in America, we don't think much. If you're white, if you're black, you think about slavery. because Black people are not totally liberated even to this day. But if you're white, you can take for granted freedom. And once you lose something, you never take it for granted again. You know, you lose your health for a while, you're sick, you get back to a certain measure of health, you never take your health lightly again, right? You know, you don't, you just don't. You've been in a dangerous situation. You never take safety and security for granted again. And that's, you know, that's what we're trying to accomplish on Passover. Now, getting back to what Yishai Ribo, you know, that Israeli songwriter writes, Ma ta rotze navin mize? Ma ta rotze nilmad mize? What do you, God, what do you want me, what do you want us to understand about this? What do you want us to learn from all of this? Well, there's, you know, two possibilities. We could learn nothing, or we can learn that we have to change something in the world. You know, Hegel, the great philosopher, he said something interesting. The one thing we learn from history is we learn nothing. It's kind of a dark, pessimistic idea. Sometimes I look at human history and I look at what's happening today and I go, didn't, you know, did we not learn anything with the rise of hatred and right-wing extremist groups, anti-Semitism, the rise of white white supremacists and oppressive governments? You see what's going on. You go, have we learned nothing? Maybe Hegel's right. But we Jews, we go, no, we have to learn. We Jews are contrarians. You know that, right? Ursula, you know that. We're contrarians, right? We go, that may be reality, but we don't accept it. That may be, you know, we're going to fight against this tendency to forget. We don't forget. And we take the lessons of history. We Jews are, every Jew is a historian. You're right. Every Jew is a historian. You know, we kind of look at history from the Jewish point of view. So what? Oh, so you know, there were the great in 1848 there were revolutions all over Europe. How did this affect the Jews? We want to know, right? Oh, the Russian Revolution. Were the Jews involved? How did it affect? You know, we look at, but we learn history. Here's something I think that a very important thing that we learned. You know, tonight we will, when we do the Kiddush, we will refer to Pesach as Zman Chirutenu, the time of our liberation, the time of our freedom, season of our freedom. You can translate it as that. I'm not quite sure how we translate it. Zman Chirutenu, the time or the season of our freedom. Now, the word is Cherut. If you ask people who know a little Hebrew, what's the Hebrew word for freedom? They'll say, almost always, they'll say Cherut. And you see it right there in the Kiddush. Chirutenu, time of our freedom. But the word Cherut, that word for freedom never appears in the Torah. The rabbis later on added that word. The word for freedom used in Torah is chofesh. Chofesh. If you say something's free, you say it's chofshi. In modern Hebrew, in Israel, you talk about a vacation. It's chofesh. I'm free from my work. Chofish. Now, the way it's used in the Torah, we talk about the liberation of an individual slave as chofish. It is something. It's individual freedom. When we talk about cherut, we talk about collective freedom. We talk about freeing of a whole people. We talk about freedom for the whole, if you extend it philosophically, freedom for the entire human race. So what's the difference between chofesh, individual freedom, and cherut, collective freedom? It's this. Chofesh is, as I'll reiterate, is individual. It's individual freedom. When we only think about our own freedom, if you only think about your own freedom, if everybody only thinks about their own freedom, what you have is anarchy. You have a narcissistic kind of society. It's all about me. How am I am not responsible for anyone else. I am free. Well, the Jewish concept of freedom is somewhat different. It's more about cherut. It's saying, you need order. You need to think about you need this concept of freedom that extends beyond yourself, that you're not totally free while others remain in chains. The collective good in Judaism is very much emphasized. Real freedom is in caring for others. Collective good. In this pandemic, we've seen. Oh, you hear my parrot? You hear the parrots out there? During this pandemic, we have seen examples of both. Examples of people being very selfish, and we've seen examples of heroic self-sacrifice. We've seen both. We've seen people hoarding, whether it's toilet paper or paper towels or tuna fish. Remember how bad it was a year ago? Hoarding. You couldn't get the quicker picker upper, right? You couldn't get Charmin. It was stupid, and people were kind of selfish. Then you saw people, especially on the front lines. You saw doctors and healthcare workers. You saw police officers and EMTs, ambulance drivers who, at great risk to themselves, just serving others. We were all in this together, and there was some really, really incredible acts of heroism during all of this. What I worry about for America at this time is people have the chofish side of freedom, the individual side of freedom. You have groups who just demand something for themselves. You have individuals who say, I have no responsibility to anyone else. Don't tread on me. I'm not going to get all political, but you know where I could go with this. And what we really need to emphasize, and we Jews are the people to remind the world about this, it is freedom is cherut, freedom is collective, freedom is concern for the common good. There's a lot of things happening in the world today. Now, in my Seder tonight, I got some people who actually one person who is engaged, a non-Jewish person engaged to a Jewish person. They're going to be there together. And so she doesn't know much about this. So I'm going to be talking about the relevance of, I hope those little question marks, I hope they'll bring up they'll ask the questions, but, you can say, well, slavery doesn't mean anything. Well, I've been in Haiti many, many times, and I've actually met, uh, I met people who were slaves. In Creole, you call them Restavix. That's the name in Creole. I met a boy who 14, 15, 16 years old. He looked like he was about 8. He was so small in stature. He'd been sold into slavery by his parents when he was very young. He slept on concrete. He was forced to carry heavy, heavy burdens and did not get a lot of food. His stature, he looked like a little kid, and he was a teenager. That's an hour, a little over an hour away from here. We have human trafficking in America. Some people are just not free. We have, you see what's happening in Western China right now with the Uyghurs. You see what's happening in North Korea. You have concentration camps. That's what they are. They're not exactly death camps, although a lot of people, I'm sure, die. But they're constant. It's horrible. There are a lot of people in this world who aren't free. And so here I am in my little free island here in America, and I'm not totally free either. And I have to remember that. I have to remember. That's why we end with the note, next year, this year we're here, next year, L'Shana Haba Berushalayim, we'll be in Jerusalem. Don't think of Jerusalem as simply that city in Eretz Yisrael. Jerusalem is an ideal. Another word for Jerusalem is Zion, right? You know that word Zion, Zionism. Zion means to indicate, it actually comes from the word to point. We're always pointing, orienting ourselves to freedom, we Jews, to justice and to human dignity. And we're all slaves in our own way. We're slaves to our thinking. We get into habits. We get into ways of doing things that we create systems, we human beings, and then we become part of the systems and we don't know how to get out of them. And on Passover, we think about how to broaden our minds, to see new possibilities in our lives, and to free ourselves from narrow thinking. Okay, that's enough from me. What do you guys have to say?
I agree with a lot of what you just said, because in my life, when I've done good for collective people, if you will, or other people, I actually got more out of it than worrying about me or how I'm going to make a living, and you just get lost in helping people. And so collectively, it resonates with me what you just said in terms of having a collective ability to care for other people and to help. So,
Yeah.
especially in this pandemic, I think you're right. All these, whether it's a teacher, medical workers, these people never looked at themselves as heroes. And now they really, I believe, they really have learned that they've done the right thing, as opposed to a normal policeman, the guy who just got killed, for example. He chose that, but people didn't choose in the pandemic. It was chosen for them. So I think that's really a meaningful approach to Passover.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a terrible year for so many people. I mean, I feel lucky that, thank God, I stayed healthy, and the majority of my family and friends also. But are we going to remember this?
We better not forget this. We better not forget what we've learned.
You know, yesterday I heard on the news, they were discussing this fiasco in Atlanta, where the state of Georgia, where they changed the voting rights and they made a mess of everything, and everyone's so upset. And the commentator said, we have returned to civil rights in the 60s and 70s. It's the same thing. It's starting all over again. And I understood the analogy, because when a woman was pounding on the governor's door to let her in, he said, Governor, who's the governor? I
Kemp.
forgot
His name is Brian
No,
Kemp.
no, the governor in the 60s. He ran for president.
Oh,
George
Wallace. Yes.
It was that's what they would do to him, and he would lock people out. So you see, 50 years later, it's starting all over. I hope it doesn't, but it looks very bad. So we have to remember the sacrifices that so many people made, so we could be sitting here today. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
On a
Stanley.
on a
Okay.
brighter note, this is from the Sisterhood's gift shop. I had to give a little
Maybe
plug.
I guess Marilyn bought ours from the Sisterhood gift shop. Stanley, you were going to say something.
Yes. The United States armies and all armies is a form of slavery. You have to obey orders. You have to obey orders. And you don't have your free will. And that's the only way it'll work, is to protect the country. And it reminded me, I had KP, like put me on pots and pans. I had 20 hours of pots and pans. You ever tried to do 20 hours of pots and pans? The only time I went for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's it, and back to pots and pans. So it's like 22 hours total, and about 20 hours of pots and pans, cleaning hot water. And I had to look at my uniform and it said United States Army to realize I wasn't a slave. But it's the only way it'll work. It's the only way it'll work. And I didn't like the life. And then after 2 years active and 2 years active reserve of the United States, 2 years active overseas, 2 years here, I did want to re-enlist to make it a career. When I first came into the Army, I wanted to make a career. That's a form of slavery, but that slavery kept the United States free. So in a sense, slavery in a limited way, but it's more of an ideal. And it wasn't slavery to one person, to the president. It was slavery to the law, the Constitution. And it's a big difference when you have slavery to a law that you are upholding and protecting your family. It works. It works good.
I think you make a good point.
For greed, for a person's greed, like the plantations in the South that we had, it was started, the whole idea of black slavery was with Portuguese. When they first went to Africa, they started slavery. They couldn't slave the Indians. The Indians wouldn't have no part of being a slave, so that's why they brought over the blacks to the New World or America. Slavery is good and it is bad.
Good? How is it good?
It was good for this nation. First Nation built this nation.
Oh, I can't hear you.
And it was built, this nation.
Yeah,
It built it through cotton and tobacco,
Yeah.
the two crops that brought money into the world. But it was bad for the blacks.
no,
And it was
I
bad
think,
for the
you know, I'm
slaveholders too,
Stanley,
because they were slaves to the blacks.
I think it was
That's
bad.
all I have to say.
I think it was bad for us spiritually as a nation. I think it planted some deep contradictions in the soul of America. It's America's original sin,
Mhm.
and we're still dealing with it. So yes, yeah, you're right economically, but the suffering of slavery still goes on. Let me just say something. You said something interesting. I like you were talking about the army, and you're talking about you're feeling like a slave.
Yes.
But you understood that, hey, you need a certain amount of order, and certainly if military life, if nothing else, is about order, right? And if you look at the word that we use for the meal tonight, it's called Seder. It's a Seder. Seder literally means order, and that there is no freedom without some rules.
Right.
There's no freedom. You know, freedom isn't anarchy. Freedom isn't only my unbridled freedom to do anything I want. Freedom means is a balance between, you know, looking after my own self-interest and the self-interest of others, understanding that they're interdependent. But there is you know, a good discussion point for the Seder tonight: freedom and order. Now you can overdo order. We know that you can be so oppressive. You know, what's the right balance? Um, yeah. So, but you bring up some good points there. Yeah.
Well, related to what you're just saying, to make the Seder, to make the order, I would say I've just spent 3 or 4 days of enslaving myself to, no, yeah, maybe you too as a cooker. We, to do it a certain way, you know, and every year I have to deliberate, should I do that or should I let that little aspect go? Should I take on this new thing, or should I, you know, steady my course and I did it 25 years, heck, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
But I think with the pandemic this year, in a way, it makes us question a little more.
Yeah.
What am I doing? What does it really mean? I know
Yes.
Phil
What
and
is it?
I'm going to be quite blunt. We were kind of agitated. We said, well, where are our kids? And why not aren't they? You know, and we said, hey, if we want it, I guess we have to do it. You know what I'm saying? And it's such a contradiction and confusion that it is a type of enslavement while it is a freedom that we choose to do it. It's such a contradiction.
Well, you know, here's something I'm just throwing out. That again, you always want those little question marks, right? You know, you see little contradictions and you want to resolve them. Moses was called an Eved Adonai. Now we say Eved can mean slave. We translate it sometimes as servant, but it's the same word. You need, there is the sense of serving, that freedom is in service, not to yourself. As Randy was saying, he feels most liberated and most uplifted when serving others. And so, you know, it's not being this unanchored boat floating around doing whatever. It is serving God, serving humanity. Now, I um Passover is highly attended by the Jewish people. You know, a lot of Jews who do nothing else are going to be in Seder's tonight. You know, for no other reason that it's family tradition. But 50 days from tomorrow night is Shavuot.
Oh.
And it's very poorly attended. Shavuot is about the giving of the Torah, right? And we have this period we call Sfirat HaOmer between Passover and Shavuot. Passover and Shavuot are kind of bookends. The reason for Passover was Shavuot. We were freed from slavery to Pharaoh, to cruelty, to oppression, to receive the Torah, to become God's servants, which brings dignity and compassion and justice into the world. And that's where the order comes in. The order comes in, it's not unbridled personal autonomy. It is saying, I'm free but my freedom, my freedom depends on a righteous order, a righteous way of living, and I think that's what Judaism is. Okay, Marlene.
You know, I think Passover evokes so many memories for all of us.
Yes.
I can remember every Passover something to remember my parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles.
Yes.
And it's the time I miss all of my family the most because we're not all together anymore. But I wanted to show you this.
Oh, let's see. What is that?
It's a part of a dish, a set of dishes. These are my grandmother's Fleischig Passover dishes.
Wow.
They're 89 years old. And
Well, wait a minute. When did your grandmother pass away?
1957.
And how old was she?
She was about 80, but they received these on her 20. My mother, during Depression.
Oh, she received them during the Depression.
My mother and her siblings chipped in. They were all young, pretty young,
okay.
For their 25th wedding anniversary, and they got them
nice.
Passover dishes. So my cousin that's coming, that I'll be with today and tomorrow, we share the grandparents, and so there'll be at least one other person to see these dishes that I use once a year. My mother, they were passed on to me, but it's wonderful memories, and I think it is the most celebrated holiday.
Yes, it is. And your grandmother's going to be with you in a real way tonight. You know that.
Oh, she's with me all the time.
Good. Okay, let's have a quick service.
Can I say something?
Sure. I want to. Yeah, go ahead, Ursula.
I became a bridge between these two cultures.
Yes.
The Jewish culture and the Christianity in Ecuador. So last night we had a Zoom with my friends from high school.
Oh, terrific.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And then the first thing that I want to be like a normal high school classmate.
Yes.
But on the other hand, they look at me up and they said, what do you do? So I told them in a few minutes what is Passover and what it means to have a Passover, and not only that is how we have Shabbat. So I give them a little bit of knowledge.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
I feel liberated, and I feel like I liberated them from some, slavery mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I can open the window so they can see more than that.
I love that expression, open a window. That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. That's lovely.
I love it.
It really is lovely. Oh, and I bet they love you for that. And I have found that so many people in Latin America, when they learn about our tradition, they're very open to it. They go, "Oh, that's beautiful." Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav lehitatef b'tzitzi. Oh, it's so nice to be davening at home and still be with you.
Thanks.
I'm gonna bring my book.
Okay. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Page 198, Nisim B'chol Yom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lesechvivina lachachin ben yom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam pokeach ivri. This is a beautiful one who frees the captive. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam roka haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hanoten la'ayef koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Ha'ma'avir sheina me'enai utnuma me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam sha'asani b'tselem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam sha'asani ben kori. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam sha'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Ozer Yisrael v'yifra. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Oter Yisrael v'yifra.
Maybe 140 years?
Now, I'm just throwing out questions that you might raise, or maybe people raise in your Seder tonight. We did not have to pick up a sword or a spear or a dagger to become free in our first liberation. Later on, there were times in our history during the Maccabee rebellion, during our rebellion against the Romans, certainly in the battle for Israel, we picked up weapons and fought, and we took the initiative for our own freedom. But our initial redemption was God doing it. And why is every other founding story, or the founding story of almost every other nation is we rose up against our oppressor and we defeated them. Uh, and that's a good question. I think I know where my mind goes to it. It's God. When God freed us, it was saying that human freedom is God's ideal. It is the moral rule of the universe. It's certainly not the rule of in the world today, or ever, or it's never been really. But For the Jew, it is something, it is God-given freedom. Human beings are supposed to exist in freedom. It's not how strong you are. It's not whether, it's not depend, should not be dependent upon how much money you have, how much military might you have, who you are. It's just the fact that you're a human being. You're supposed to be free, and that's God-given. Anyway, that's something that might come up. You know, again, the little question marks, right? Page 218. Hallelujah. 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 Kyrie Uzo. Hallelujah. Bikuratav. Hallelujah. Kero good Lord. Hallelujah. 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 Take a shofar. Hallelujah. Never bechinot. Hallelujah. To umafot. Hallelujah. Benim benini ve'ugav. Hallelujah. 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 Tzeltzele Shema. Hallelujah. Tzeltzele Trua. Kolan Shema Tel Hallelujah. Kolan Shema Tel Hallelujah. 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 Page 222, second page. Shochenat Maharon Begadosh Shamo Tuvraninu Tzadikim Ba'adonai LaYesharim Nava Tehila Befi Yesharim Titala Udivrei Tzadikim Titbarach Shon Chasidim Titromam Uvekerev Kedoshim Titkada Umakalot Revivot 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 Amcha Beit Yisrael Umakalot Revivot 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 Amcha Beit Yisrael Berina Yipare Shimcha Malkeinu B'chol Dor Vador Verina Yipar Shimcha Malkeinu Ledor B'chol Dor Vador Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu El HaMelech HaGadol HaKadosh BaShamayim Uba'aretz Ki Lachana Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Shir Shivcha Ha'el v'Zimra Oza Memshala Netzach Gedola Gevra Tehila Tiferet Kedoshah Malchot Brachot Odot Me'ata V'Yad Olam Ata Adonai El Melech Gadol B'Tishba'ot El HaHodaot Adon הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אל חיי העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמך, ויעמד ברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל. בגולה, בגולה, ובזמן קריב ימרו. אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ומעלמיה יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, יתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה, שמי קודשא עלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, גם ירא Amen. We rise for the Baruch. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Baruchu et Adonai Hamevora. Baruchu et Adonai Hamevora. Baruch Adonai Hamevora. Le'olam ha'ed. Baruch Adonai Hamevora. Le'olam ha'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Yosef Hamevora. Lai, 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 lai. Page 230. Ve'ha'arenu ve'toratecha ve'damek libeinu b'mitzvotecha ve'yachir levaveinu le'ahava u'lira et shemecha ve'lo nikalem ve'lo nikashem Leon Ha'ed Ki v'shem kol shecha Agadol v'hanora v'atachnu Nagila v'nismecha Nagila v'nismecha v'shuatecha Baruch atah Adonai Erbamo Yisrael v'ahava Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Le'olam ha'ed, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Echa, Bechol lebavcha, Ubechol nafshecha, Ubechol meotecha, Ve'hayu Advarim ha'ed asher anuchi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha v'lechtecha ha'moderim uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha uv'shartam lo'ot al yedecha והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, וביהי שעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם מכל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. Ani Adonai Lehechem Emet. 240. Mi kamocha Eli Adonai. Mi kamocha Nedar Bakodesh. Norani lo O Sefer. Norani lo O Sefer. Shira Chadasha. Shibechu Giulim. B'shimcha al tzvataya. Yachad kulam. Hodu v'imlichu. E'amru Adonai Yimlo Le'olam va'ed Tur Yisrael Umav Yesrat Yisrael Uvdei Chinumecha Yehuda v'Yisrael Go Aleinu Adonai Tzvot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai God Yisrael. And we rise for the tefillah. Baruch atah Eloheinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGidol HaRacham, El Elyon, Omer Chasadim, Omne Alto, Ezocher Kasdei Amo, Umedim Tuala Lifnei B'neihem, Lema'an Shemo V'Yahava, Melech Ozeru, Baruch Adonai, Magen Avraham, Yisrael Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Hayei Meitim Atah, Shiva Ruach Umarid Hadas, Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayei Meitim Beracham, Shometh Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir
Asurim,
Chayem, Emunato, Ganei Afar,
Mikamo Kapal Givuro,
Umido Me'olam, Chaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua V'neman Hatala, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechaye
Ametim,
Haolam, Kashem Shamati Shimoto B'Shmei Marot, HaKatuv Al Yad V'Yechav Karat Ze'em Zevi Amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Elokul Haaretz, Adir, Adireno Adonai, Adonai Ma, Adir Shimcha B'Chol Haaretz. Baruch Kevod Adonai Min Kol Echad Hu Eloheinu Hu Avinu Hu Malkeinu Hu Mosheinu Hu Yashni Baracham Avnei Ani Adonai Elohechem Im Lo Adonai Elohai Yitzion Dor Vador Hallelujah Dor Vador Nagid Gad Lecha Ulenetzach Netzachim Kedushat Vanagdish V'shivacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yemush le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Right in front of me, I have a lake, and you can hear some geese. And there's a mama goose and a papa goose and some little goslings, and they're just waddling past. Just stop to say hello. Can you hear them?
Yes, I hear him.
Rabbi, on the same thing.
Huh?
2 months ago, I got a cataract operation on my right eye.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I got my new glasses.
Ah, okay.
And when you get your new glasses, the world is beautiful. Absolute, the colors that you missed for such a long time. I don't need it in my left eye. My left eye is okay. I didn't have to go through my left eye.
Isn't that wonderful?
But it's so beautiful, the greens and the red.
Wow. Wow.
Oranges.
Wow.
And
Wow.
this world is so beautiful now. So I got my glasses this yesterday afternoon. And
Wonderful.
I'm wearing them, and it's so beautiful.
And Betty got her first shot, right,
Yeah.
Betty?
Yeah.
So
That was
she's not taking things for granted either.
No.
The world's good. The world's beautiful. We all have something to be thankful for.
Yes.
Page 250. Yismechu v'malchutecha shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutecha shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat Aha Mekadeshe, Mekadeshe Shvi Shabbat. Kulam Yispo Veyitangu Mituvecha Shabbat. Yismechu Malchutecha Shomrei 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 Shabbat Ore Oneg Shabbat. Bahashvi Ratzita bo Kidashto Shabbat. Chemdat Yaminoto Karata Shabbat Yismichu B'malchutecha Shomrei Shabbat Vikore Oneg Shabbat Yismichu B'malchutecha Shomrei Shabbat Vikore Oneg Shabbat. Marlene, that's an
Yeah,
old tune, and you sang it with your grandpa, with your Zeta, in his shul. I know it when you were a little girl, right? You davened with him, and that is undoubtedly a tune that you sang with your Zeta.
my grandfather went to a tiny little shul, and I went to a bigger one. So I never, maybe I visited him on Yom Kippur, on the way home. But I have to tell the truth. The only time we davened together was in the mornings. I was a little girl. He used to daven every morning, and I'd stay there. And then Passover. But I never davened with him in a little shul.
That's
But he's
that.
with me. We started our Seder so late that I can see my sister falling asleep in her soup. By the time
Don't
we
make
went
your
up,
Seder too long.
today we won't, believe me.
A Seder should be like a bikini.
Ooh, short.
It should be long enough to cover the subject and short enough to be interesting.
Very good. I like that. I'll say that.
You are the naughty
Don't make
rabbi.
it. Don't torture people. Make them wait a little bit. You got to do it. But the ones that go till 2 a.m, people brag about how long. I go that you're just people will remember that and they'll dread it.
I'm going to try it out.
Remember that.
Make it fun. Make it interesting. Okay. Sim shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Ten v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amecha. Barcheinu yotzreinu kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha. Sim shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. So let's just take a few moments for our own private prayers and meditations. Maybe we can meditate on the idea of freedom, what it means to us. Oh, say shalom bimrama. Say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'himeru. Himeru. Amen. Say shalom. Say shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom. Say shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom. Say shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom. Say shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. V'maru. Amen. We rise for the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabbat kol adekadula yotzeh reshi lo asan kugoye haratzot elo zamalim b'mishpachot adama anachnu korim umishtachavim umorim לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו echad. The mourner's Kaddish, Yitgadal, Yitgadal, Be'almad Barach Yerotev Yamlich Malchute, Chaychon Yomechon, Kayedechol Beit Yisrael, Magalav Yizman Karim, Yahei Shmei Rabba Mebarach Le'olam Le'me'el Amai. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitfa'ar v'yitormam v'yitnoseh. Yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitala shmeid kudsha brichu. Ve'elam min kol berachata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata. Damiran v'yalma v'yimrot. Ve'ei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael. Osei shalom v'yimam. V'yasei shalom. Aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael. If you got your Mishkan Tefillah there, turn to page 665.
665.
I don't think I have.
Avadim hayinu be'eretz Mitzrayim b'Mitzrayim. Avadim hayinu ata b'nei chorin. Avadim hayinu be'eretz Mitzrayim b'Mitzrayim. Avadim hayinu ata b'nei chorin. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Hello, Pharaoh, let my people go. Thus saith the Lord, Moses said, let my people go. If not, I'll smite your firstborn dead. Let my people go. No more shall they in bondage toll. Let my people go. Let them come out of Egypt's toil. Let my people go. And that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to let my people go. Okay, Chag Sameach, everybody. See you soon.
Bye-bye.